Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you for doing this for us. My goal here is to help our viewers understand, what you're offering for the Coastal Bend, what it entails, how much it's going to cost, some of the specifications of it, and we really appreciate you doing it. So let's start with that. Let's start with what do you bring to the Coastal Bend? What does Seven Seas Water Group bring to the Coastal Bend?
Yeah, so thank you very much, Suzanne. Seven Seas Water Group is the sole provider of water as a service. So what we would bring and bringing to the coastal bend and to communities in Texas and anywhere else in the United States and outside is really water where it's otherwise not usable. In this case, brackish water treatment. So water as a service means that we take the entire risk on ourselves. We invest, we engineer, procure, construct, maintain, operate the plant for many years 10, 20, 30 years or more. And the customer ultimately only pays for the water that they subscribe to, and that's contractually obligated by us to deliver in the quantity and quality of water that they need. In other words, there is no upfront cost. There is no engineering fee that you have to pay. There is nothing at all from the customer that has to be paid unless and until we deliver fresh drinking water.
Okay. Now let's start with the S2WA agreement that you have, and let's start with the environmental portion of it.
First.
What studies have been done to indicate waste discharge would not cause issues in Baffin Bay?
So as with SCWA, we signed a contract last August, as you probably know. We are exploring different routes of discharge. A discharge permit, depending on whether you do deep well injection or surface water discharge or anywhere else, takes between 3 to 12 months. And so that's the process that we're in right now. We have had some hydrological studies done, and we have also started with the discharge studies for the 3 MGD plant with SCWA, but we're still not at the permitting stage where we had finally decided where the discharge will ultimately go.
So the studies aren't completed yet? Are you in
That
process
is
of
correct.
that?
That
Okay.
is correct.
So how many more need to be completed, do you think? Or
Well, on SCWA, we have the hydrological study, we have the permitting study, we have the hydraulic study, and we have just not yet decided based on the best agreement with TCEQ where the discharge will ultimately go. The most likely scenario at this point is probably that it's going to be a deep well injected, just like you have anywhere else in Texas. You have about 48,000 deep well injection wells in Texas. So the whole idea about Baffin Bay and a surface water discharge was an idea by a public official. And if there is a environmental benefit, we are the water guys. We like to do what is environmentally friendly. Then that's a route we would go. Alternatively, you can deep well inject and make sure that there is no negative effect. I understand that there has been some significant outcry discussions, but we are not there. We, as Seven Seas Water Group, have never announced that we're going to, surface water discharge or discharge into the bay. We will look for the best alternative in cooperation and permitting with TCEQ.
so deep well injection is on the table at this point then?
Yes, ma'am, it is.
Okay, perfect. Okay, what conversations have you had with the Heart Research Institute about potential impacts? Have you had any of those or no?
I know that the Heart Institute doesn't directly work with private entities. We've had conversations. The Heart Institute, the way I understand it, sees some environmental benefits to surface water discharge. But again, all that is in conversations, and we will not do anything that is not ultimately not only environmentally friendly, but approved by TCEQ.
So you have had discussions with the Heart Institute then, is that
We have met with them, of course, yes.
okay? And they put for formal input or studies or just conversations at this point?
Conversations so far, we have not engaged them in a formal study.
Okay, all right. What is the projected waste stream for a 30 million gallon a day project, do you think?
So again, the SCWA project that we have signed in August of last year is a 3 million gallons a day project.
Okay.
Everything else, as you know, is a conversation between the city of Corpus Christi and SCWA. I know, again, it's gotten a lot of attention, and we would love to support both cities and ultimately beneficiaries in supporting that project. But it is a project that has not yet gotten off the ground because the city of Corpus Christi and SCWA have yet to agree what they will ultimately do. So I can hope to speak about the 3 MGD plan and what we're doing and what we have contracted to do and how we're working with Kleber County. However, when it comes to the 30 MGD plan, It's a lot of speculation because it depends ultimately on the agreement between those two public entities that, of course, we would love to support.
Okay, so we're just in the talking phases with the 30 MGD and we're not talking about that. Okay.
Yes, ma'am. I understand that the way I understand what happened in the city of Corpus Christi council meeting is that they have been waiting to negotiate and ultimately decide. I think now the new date is September 23 or 24. So hopefully in the next 7 weeks, those two public entities, obviously with our support, will negotiate, will decide what they want to do, will decide what needs to happen. We in the background are doing the same hydrological, hydraulic, and discharge studies, what it would mean for the aquifer, what it would mean for a permitting stage, how we could dispose of this water if they were to ultimately agree. But we're nowhere near as close to that as we obviously have been with the 3 MGD plan that we signed last August.
Okay, so what I'm hearing you say is you are doing studies with the 30 MGD right now on the offset that they would require this or
We are
ask
looking
for
into
this.
that. Yes, we don't have answers yet. You're exactly right. We're looking into that.
Okay, all right. So you don't have any hard numbers like projected waste stream, but you know that you can deliver this, correct?
Which is also part of the hydrological study that we think we can deliver up to 30 MGD, but this needs to be confirmed again with the availability of brackish water in the aquifer.
Okay. Let me ask you this. Why did Seven Seas pursue this as a sole source service contract rather than public bidding on this deal?
The 3 MGD?
Yeah.
So ultimately, we are not the ones to decide whether this is an RFP, whether it's a sole source. This is the decision by the customer. As you know, probably better than me, Texas is in a significant drought restriction, and water is never a problem until it's an emergency. When it comes to ultimately deciding how to proceed, that's the customer's decision, and I think we did significant legal and other studies to make sure that that is possible. The price for water is ultimately decided by the customer. In other words, it's a competitive situation. And I think what you have also heard in a public statement by Judge Madrid is that the price for water that was offered to the city of Corpus Christi from SCWA is lower than the future projected price that SCWA pays to the city of Corpus Christi. So in other words, ultimately, what a public procurement process does is it takes a long time, it's very costly, but if the price you end up with is ultimately cheaper and lower than what the alternative is, then it questions the whole public procurement benefit of going through a process if there's a clear defined price that is lower than what you're currently paying.
So STWA asked for this specific kind of agreement. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. That's correct.
Okay. And so Seven Seas did not make that classification.
We work with the customer. We said you can go this route or that route. It's your decision. Either which way, we are there to support you.
Okay. And Alice, your deal, you went through an open RFP. Why do you think Corpus Christi and STWA decided to not do that?
I think, again, there's a lot of demand. There has been economic development in the area. There's a lot of new population growth that requires a fast decision. And again, they looked at prices and what Alice is paying and what other people are paying. And then they negotiated, very difficult with us, obviously, to make sure they got the best price possible. And I think they probably went through the process. Does it make sense for us to delay this for at least 18 months, hire an engineering firm, come up with a procurement process, and ultimately lose that time and possibly then pay more because somebody has to recoup that investment, or get a better, faster, and less expensive solution right now? And I'm guessing that's where they ultimately decided that that's the best interest of their off-takers.
So we're talking about timing and money, is that correct?
Yeah, I think going through a public procurement process, if you have a price that is more competitive, would ultimately cost more and take more time.
Okay. Why does your contract state Seven Seas will be the only legal and beneficial operator and owner, I guess is what it says, during
Well, we have an exclusive agreement with SCWA. We, Seven Seas Water, do not own the water rights. The water rights are a public good, and we are responsible for making sure that any unusable brackish water that we take out of the ground, we own and operate the plant. That's what we own. That's what we do, and deliver it, as I mentioned at the beginning, to quantity and quality of the water that we're contracted to deliver. So in other words, the water is taken out of the ground. It's not our water. We treat it, and then we give it back. Now, STWA is the exclusive provider in the area for all their customers. We cannot sell directly to their customers. It's STWA who can. So in other words, we are the exclusive provider and owner of our plant, but they are the owner of delivering that water, and the landowner is the owner of the water rights.
Can Seven Seas sell um, the facility or water rights during the term of this agreement?
No, we do not own the water rights. As I said, we cannot sell that. We do not own the water rights. We only sell the treated water that is required in order to make it drinkable.
Okay, so you can't sell the water to anyone
We
else.
cannot sell the water to anybody else. It's exclusive to STWA. Now, STWA, which is again the reason why they can sell it to the city of Corpus Christi, can decide to whom they want to sell the water. But since it's not ours and we are not the utility, we are merely the treatment partner to make sure it's available to them.
Okay. What's the project term?
It's a 30-year term with an option for a 15-year extension at the choice of the customer.
Okay, all right. And what are the actual water charges and pricing structures? We have
I think
schedule,
there's,
do we
go
have a
ahead.
we got a redacted version of Schedule 2.
Yes. So what happens right now, there's a lot of public information requests. And of course, I think as you can appreciate, there's a lot of competitive information in there. I think we've gone the route that we've asked the Texas Attorney General to opine what needs to be publicly made available and what not. So we're waiting for that answer before obviously everything is either going to be made public or the Texas Attorney General will decide what needs to be made public and what not.
So there's a chance that we could get the non-redacted version of it, or they,
If that's what the Attorney General decides, of course.
okay, all right. So let me ask you this then. Why should taxpayers commit to this project without knowing that price?
Well, I can tell you that the South Texas Water Authority has decided that that is a lower price than what they are currently and in the future paying to the city of Corpus Christi. So my answer would be you have a decisive body that negotiated this deal and negotiated a deal better than what you have in the future. So as a taxpayer, I'm a taxpayer, you're a taxpayer. Ultimately, I want my representative to get the best possible deal from me. And in this case, I can guarantee that they got a better deal than they would have had they not negotiated with us.
Well, we don't know because we don't know what the price is, but we can take your word for it, I guess.
Take my word for now. But you can now. What is important is that you can take that Judge Madrid in a public meeting said to the City Council of Corpus Christi that they're going to charge them about $5.50, right, if they were to buy water from STWA. I think your reporting showed that the future rate for Corpus Christi would be either $11 or $8. 11 and 8 is more than 550.
Yes, that is correct. All right, what's the total financial commitment then for both STWA and Corpus Christi over the life of the contract then?
Again, I do not have an answer for Corpus Christi because we have not had an agreement with them, and it's between STWA and the city of Corpus Christi. The obligation from STWA with Seven Seas Water Group is that over the next 30 years, once the plant is operational, they will take a minimum volume commitment of 3 million gallons of water per day. We deliver it to the quantity and quality of the contract, and that will take 30 years. And then it's at their discretion if they want to extend it. And in those 30 years, Seven Seas Water is responsible for the capex, the maintenance, the operation, and everything that is required in order to deliver that water.
What are the guaranteed minimum purchase terms? Do we have
As
that?
long as we deliver the water 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, the minimum volume commitment that the STWA committed to that they need for their growth is 3 million gallons a day. We have built or are going to build a plan for up to 4 million gallons a day. So we have the redundancy that if there are peaks and ebbs, that we can always make sure that we can always provide at least 3 million gallons a day.
Okay, so that's the minimum of what we're talking about. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Are there termination fees or penalties? We also, Schedule 8 is also redacted.
Again, there's sensitive commercial information. There are obviously, we invest a lot of money and a lot of risk, right? For example, between now and until water is flowing, as I mentioned earlier, STWA doesn't pay a penny. And this is typical for all water as a service contracts that we have. But the only obligation is ultimately for them at the time the water is ready is to take that water and then for them to sell it to whomever they choose to do so.
Are there other agreements with STWA for a reduced price per gallon if, let's say you bring on more customers?
Again, we cannot bring on more customers. If they choose to increase, obviously, the size of the plan, then that's a future negotiation. There are no current agreements. But I would assume that if they choose, for example, to sell to the city of Corpus Christi, that obviously gives you some economies of scale.
If you can't tell me the termination fees or penalties, can we talk about how these costs compare to other water supply options potentially?
Of course, I can tell you that, again, we mentioned earlier.
Or maybe a cost comparison per gallon comparison?
Yeah, well, we talked about the city of Corpus Christi, right? We talked 550 versus 8 and 11. The other thing is that, of course, as you know, in the city of Corpus Christi, there are opportunities to go for sometimes cheaper, sometimes very expensive funding that is attached to some significant bonds and debt requirements that you take on. With Seven Seas, none of this exists. So again, on a per gallon, per treated alternative, from what STWA will pay in the future to Corpus Christi if they didn't have Seven Seas to what they're paying Seven Seas, I can guarantee you that our price is guaranteed for the next 30 years. There are no price hikes. There are no increases. The only thing that will increase is the consumer price index. In other words, inflation, that would be obviously a pass through to the customer. But there is no situation as you have with others that you have a constant increase in costs and it's difficult to predict what the price will be in 10, 15 years. This plant will have the exact same price subject to CPI.
So we really don't have cost comparisons then as to other
Oh,
products.
we really do. We have the public statement by the judge of 550 versus 8. And we have obviously the city and hopefully in the future a non-redacted version, which will show that whatever they pay to Seven Seas is less than what is projected they would pay to Corpus Christi.
Are you willing to supply an unredacted version before a vote or potentially in the near
I think we are, again, doing what the Texas Attorney General decides to do. I'm a big believer in going by the law and order of what we are doing. And in this case, we also don't want to harm any commercial opportunities for us or for the customer.
Okay, why require an NDA for city officials to review a public water contract?
I think ultimately we wanted to make sure that, again, it's STWA, which is our customer. If the city of Corpus Christi wants to review a contract, then we want to make sure that obviously that's not going to be used to our disadvantage.
Have you done that with other public deals?
Have we done what with other public deals?
Have you redacted, have them sign NDAs with other?
Of course, we are also always protected, but there are no secrets. It is really only to make sure that, if you offer something in a public environment, you want to make sure that, you're protected, your commercial opportunities are given, and you don't ultimately lose a deal because not everybody always plays with the same cards on the table. But again, all our deals, we do a lot of municipal deals, whether it's in the Caribbean, it's Panama, Peru, or in the United States. The city of Alice, so there is no smoke and mirrors.
Okay, is it something unique that Seven Seas does that maybe they want to protect? Is that what we're
Of
talking
course, we have, every company claims to have a unique approach. I think we have a very unique approach in how we do this. But ultimately, I think the benefit is, the proof is in the pudding. When people end up paying less than they pay for the alternative, then I think everybody should be happy and confident.
All right, and do we have an estimated price per 1,000 gallons for electric? Do we have any kind of ideas?
No, this is a pass through, so no, I don't have that number. I think there are estimates out there, and it also depends. Again, if you look at it from the STWA point of view, the where and how they would distribute that throughout the system. But if you look at the Corpus Christi idea, then I think there are discussions about delivering water through the pipe back to Corpus Christi, which is obviously a longer distance. And I do not have the exact electricity numbers because those obviously will also be separately, without Seven Seas, need to be negotiated between the electricity provider and STWA.
Okay, let's talk about ratepayers now. How does this agreement serve the public interest versus private profit, do you think?
I happen to believe that this is the best possible alternative. I'm a big believer in having government do what government does well and have private entities do what private entities do well. Again, we do not own the water. We do not own the utility or the distribution. The ratepayer will ultimately have the same rights, the same counterparty with STWA or the city of Corpus Christi. But what I do believe in is having private companies come up with their own skin in the game, invest 100% of the equity, and make their money over 30 years back in order to provide what I think is the most vital good to any citizen, which is fresh drinking water. So this way you get the best out of both worlds. You potentially use public funding for pipeline, for infrastructure, for non-revenue water, and you require private entities like Seven Seas to invest and to make sure that that water is delivered constantly to a quality and quantity that we have to deliver it. And I think that's ultimately a win-win for all ratepayers and for all consumers that benefit from a Seven Seas water as a service contract.
What do you say to people that say, given this is a decades-long commitment, obviously, shouldn't all terms be public before the city commits?
Look, I'm not here to ultimately decide what the public procurement regulations are. My job is to provide the best possible alternative to getting reliable, safe drinking water from all aspects. That includes the off-takers, the environment, our shareholders, the public, everybody. So whatever the Attorney General might say, whatever the outcome will be, we will comply. There is no secrets. It just needs to be a level playing field. And for that reason, I think our model works very, very well.
And we talked about this earlier, but when do you expect the city to vote? And will you release your studies that you've been doing and terms before that date potentially?
So I understand that the preliminary studies that I mentioned, the hydrological study, the hydraulic study, and the discharge study are all expected to be in draft term by the end of August or by early September. So whatever we will have commissioned and whatever we will find out, we will, of course, discuss it with the customer. And our customer in this case is STWA.
All right. And we talked about the NDAs earlier, and just I want to clarify this. In your other municipal deals, how many required NDAs or had this level of redaction? Were they all the same? All the deals the same you do? Are they all the same?
We normally all, from our point of view, every deal is the same. And so obviously this is very, very different in this case because you got a lot of public information requests, a lot of public attention, but we handle every single request the same way no matter where we operate.
Can you tell me then what were the final costs versus initial estimates with some of these other deals?
We always, every single project that we've done over the 30-year timeline of the company, the CapEx and the investment we've made have always gone either on spec or tiny below what we have estimated.
Okay. If the plant underperforms or fails,
Yes.
what is your plan for a backup supply?
As I said, we have the obligation. We do not get paid so that if we do not supply the water. So the risk is really on us, which goes back to your previous question. What's the benefit to the taxpayer and the off-taker? So we are building a 4 MGD plant, although we only have to deliver 3 MGDs to have that redundancy, to have an additional 1 million gallons a day to make up for any shortfall, backwash, cleaning, downtime, whatever it takes. And so if there were a case in which we, for whatever reason, could not deliver water, we would also not get paid. But let me be clear, over the timeline of this company, we have always delivered 100% of the water, 100% of the time, because otherwise we do not get paid. So that's why this business model works so well for the off-taker, because all the risk is with the private developer, in this case, Seven Seas Water Group, and they have the same counterparty with STWA to make sure that their water is safe and drinkable and will be provided the same way it's been provided before.
So let's say it doesn't work, you don't get paid, then will Seven Seas pay for alternative sourcing, or does that
I
something?
think we have an obligation to make sure that our plant works. And over the last years of existence, it's always worked. There has never been a case where we put so much money and so much effort at the beginning stages of this project because it's our capital investment that goes in, that scenario would harm us so much more that will never happen.
What state or federal agencies have reviewed this deal or terms, other than the AG's office?
I'm not aware of anybody having specifically reviewed that.
Okay. Has the AG raised any concerns formally or informally that you can tell me
So
about?
far, not that I know of.
Okay. What's Seven Seas projected profit margin over the life of this deal?
Well, we are a private entity, and so these are depending on very much also how we operate the plant, how successful we are, right? How we can hopefully operate this to the best ability, and see how the city of the area of SWA will ultimately grow. It's also a great opportunity.
Can you tell me how much the city's payments go to profit versus operation? Can you tell me that?
I don't have that on top of my head, but more importantly, again, it very much varies and depends. And Seven Seas is a for-profit company, clearly. If I wanted to be in a business where I only care about money, I would probably take a different job than this one.
Okay. Is there anything else you want to add?
I'm gonna scoot over here. Can you hear me okay?
I can. This is the proof that it's not live. Okay.
Exactly. I just had a couple of quick follow-up questions. Specifically,
Well, Rachel, are they more difficult or easier than Suzanne?
I like to ask the difficult questions.
Oh,
don't
God,
you?
okay.
So, specifically, when Suzanne asked about discharge into Baffin Bay or potentially deep well injection, so your company has not made a determination as to which makes more sense. However, a Seven Seas rep told members of the public that deep well injection does not make sense given where the location is, and that it's incredibly energy intensive and could likely cause, we've seen in Texas issues with fracking and deep well injections. So, what would be concerns, kind of based off what your own rep had told residents related to deep well injection?
Well, I wasn't there. I don't know what the rep has said or who said what, but I can tell you that, as I mentioned, we will not do a project where there are environmental concerns or where we do not have the TCEQ or any public environmental public agencies permit to do what was right to do. So I can tell you that we're currently very much looking into deep well injection. As I said, there are 48,000 deep well injection wells just in Texas alone. You know this very much from the oil and gas business. This is different and easier, the water that would be discharged. But again, we are in the permitting process and we will not do anything that doesn't have the permit. We cannot, will not. And I believe from what we've seen, yes, it is more energy intensive if you choose to deep well inject. But what we have seen is that it's economically feasible, which again goes earlier about the profits. It's too early to tell. But ultimately, I believe that the Seven Seas Water as a Service model is the way to really revolutionize Texas, revolutionize areas where you have drought-stricken areas, population growth, and an enormous opportunity to take what used to be unusable brackish water and make it drinking water. And that includes a very safe, reliable environmental discharge.
When you talk about wells and taking from aquifers, ultimately the state of Texas is looking at regulations in the future because it's kind of like you stick a straw in and you're taking your cone of depression, right? Is there a concern that at some point in the future, Seven Seas Water and the South Texas Water Authority contract could be limited in the amount of water they were allowed to pull?
So the way we make sure that we have a hydrological study, we had a hydrological study done to make sure that we can take 3 MGD out of this, 3 million gallons a day out of this aquifer. There's a brackish aquifer where there are millions and millions and millions of gallons available. And the 3 million gallons a day were permitted. Hydrological study said no problem. If we now were to go for a larger amount, which is why we have to do a separate hydrological study, we want to make sure that in case, again, for our benefit, that there is reliability of brackish water for us for at least 30 years. So that will be the rule that we take. We have independent studies and permits taken to ensure that we can do what we are supposed to do, which is draw that water out of the ground and make it drinkable.
And so just to be clear, because I was listening as you were talking with Suzanne, the additional studies sized up to potentially 30 million gallons per day. The drafts of those studies will be available end of August for the city of Corpus Christi.
As I said to Suzanne, we are in the middle of it, and the drafts and whatever we discuss will be available in this case to us and potentially our customer with this STWA. I am not a supplier to the city of Corpus Christi. It's between the two public entities. Again, we're happy to help. I've met with city officials, whether it's council members or city staff. I think we've been nothing but transparent, and I would love to have even a closer relationship. But ultimately, our customer in this case, Rachel, is STWA.
Right. I do understand that. The reason I'm asking is I've listened to an audio recording of the Seven Seas rep who met with residents. And in that audio recording, the Seven Seas rep says the studies haven't been done and we do not intend on doing those studies unless the city signs on, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I imagine there's an expense to completing
Yes.
those studies. So from a due diligence perspective, what I want to know is, are those studies being done, right? Up to 30 million gallons per day? Because essentially, how would the city sign on without those studies being done?
Okay, so let's talk about this for a second. So
Okay.
I can tell you the studies are being done. full stop, period. I know that, I know the dates. And whether they will be fully available or in draft form by the end of August, early September, depends on, you know, how it is with people that you rely on, whether it's for your house or contractors, right? That's always the list. But that's within the 2 to 4 week frame, will be fully expected. Separately, the deal between potentially the city of Corpus Christi and SCWA, I believe, and again, we're not part of that deal, should have 2 components to it. One, if SCWA can deliver up to a fixed amount, 28 million gallons a day, I understand they're discussing, then the city of Corpus Christi will take that water up to a certain price. And then what you will do is you will require for Seven Seas Water Group to confirm that up to X amount and Y price, Seven Seas will deliver that water to SCWA, who in turn can sell it to the city of Corpus Christi. So if they were to meet and discuss a contract, then that contract could have provisions that neither party can cancel this agreement for convenience, but will agree to that if you deliver to me X amount of water for Y price, then I should take it. And by the way, if you can't, then we should renegotiate.
That's helpful. That's really good information. Thank you. And it's complicated because you are a private company, but you're dealing with public entities. And from a transparency perspective, the public likes to be able to assess projects, correct? And so I think that that's where a bit of the
I totally agree with you. 2 things. A, I'm part of the public, so I agree with you. I want to do that too. But B, it's not the private company, it's not the public entity, it's the individuals. You always deal with people at the end of the day. And I think we, as I said, we're Seven Seas Water Group. We do water. This is what we do day in and day out. And this is what we focus on. So this is not a nasty coal mine or crazy, a disgusting toxic plant. This is to deliver water. I've been involved in the city of Corpus Christi for more than 15 years, where there was Mayor Martinez in charge. And former Governor Rick Perry said to then my boss and me 15 years ago, $3.2 billion of private investment are waiting to go into South Texas based on the lack of water sustainability. This was 15 years ago. The amount of opportunity this area of the country has, but having sustainable, drought-proven, and reliable and fixed pricing for water is immense. And we would love to play a role with water as a service to make that available and to be as transparent without shooting ourselves in the foot as much as we can and with anybody who wants to talk to us. But in a project like this, where you have a 3 MGD plant and all of a sudden people get all excited because some elected official says it's a 30 MGD plant, does not mean a private company has done all that work that we want to make sure is done before we sign a contract. Because once again, the contract requires that we have to invest, in this case, if the 2 entities require, hundreds of millions of dollars to make sure that our money will ultimately get repaid over a long period of time.
That certainly makes sense. So thank you for clarifying those statements made by one of your employees. We appreciate it.